I had arrived in the castle town, flourishing under the shadow of the royal palace. My name is Shrine. I was once the sole apprentice of the world's last magician, my master. Now, I have become the last magician myself. Today, magic is rare, its connection to the world faint. Yet there are times when it is still needed. I travel the world, answering the calls for magic wherever they arise. At the time, my travel funds were meager, and I sought shelter at the home of a young boy. His name was Ivan, a good-hearted boy, though he seemed a bit timid. Having lost his parents at an early age, he now managed the farmland they left behind, all on his own. When Evan learned I was a magician, he begged me to teach him how to use magic. For the record, this sort of request is a common occurrence during my travels. Evan was not the first to seek the secrets of magic from me. And a magician being asked for guidance has little reason to refuse a potential apprentice. Yet there is, of course, a reason why I have come to bear the title of the Last Wizard. Magic cannot be wielded by those who would seek to destroy the order and balance the fabric of the world itself. That said, magic is, by its nature, an act that disrupts the world's laws. Finding the right balance is the greatest challenge to mastering magic. And it's often the reason why so many fail. Still, I decided to give Evan a lesson in basic magic. One of the simplest spells I know is called Drop Things. It's a magic that creates objects out of nothing. For beginners, it's customary to start with something as small and simple as candy. I gave my wand a staff about the length of my forearm, a light wave. A few pieces of candy appeared in mid-air and fell into Evan's outstretched hand. Evan, astonished, eagerly begged to learn how to perform the trick himself. This basic spell is relatively easy for beginners to manage, so long as they are closely supervised by a skilled magician. Unfortunately, Evan seemed to be the sort who struggled with magic. His wand sliced through the air again and again, yet no candy appeared. Still, his persistence was extraordinary. What began as a simple lesson at midday stretched into the evening, as darkness settled outside. Just as I began yearning for supper, Evan finally succeeded in conjuring a single piece of candy. Overjoyed, he beamed with pride. I took the candy, broke it in two, and handed one half back to Evan, tossing the other half into my mouth. The candy tasted bitter. As I continued teaching magic to the clumsy apprentice Evan, my stay in this town stretched beyond a week. I had a growing sense, almost a certainty, that something would happen here. Something that would call for magic. And so, as fate would have it, that day came. One afternoon, Evan returned from his farm work, his expression grim and dark. I asked him what had happened, and he began to explain. There was a girl, much like Evan, who had also lost her family at a young age. Her name was Juju, and she made her living selling fruit at a stall in the marketplace. I had seen Juju before. It was on one of my trips into town with Evan to buy supplies. Juju, the cheerful fruit seller, was clearly well liked by everyone in the bustling market. I remember wanting some oranges that day, and carefully picking out the best ones at her stall. Meanwhile, Evan stood awkwardly at a distance, glancing down in embarrassment. Beside the stall, a large white dog sat quietly, its presence as calm as the girl's lively demeanor. Both the dog and I couldn't help but wonder at Evan's strange behavior. But back to the present. Evan told me that today, Juju seemed different. Their usual bright smile was nowhere to be seen. When Evan asked some townsfolk what had happened, he learned the reason. The large white dog, her only family, had died the night before. Indeed, now that I thought about it, the dog that always sat loyally beside her stall was absent today. Evan finished his story with a heavy sigh, and then, as if struck by an idea, he turned to me with a plea. Could you use magic to bring Juju's dog back to life? There is a way to use magic to bring the dead back to life. But it is exceedingly difficult. As I've said before, magic that disrupts the world's order, the fabric of reality, cannot be realized. And it's not hard to imagine that the greatest violation of that order would be to resurrect the dead. Evan's expression was one of desperate determination. Whether an act goes against the order of the world or not is something beyond human comprehension. Yet, in Evan's earnest plea, I felt there was a certain righteousness, a spark of truth. It was an impossible wish, but for once, I felt it was right to try to grant it. I instructed Evan to gather the various tools needed for the spell and prepared for the ritual. I also asked him where the dog had been buried. It was in a corner of the cemetery beside the church. When all was ready, that night, Evan and I made our way to the cemetery. In the morning mist, Evan and I had completed the ritual. The sky was painted with a beautiful gradient, fading from a soft red to pale blue. The night's ritual had left both of us utterly exhausted. The result was failure. Despite our best preparations and every effort, the dog did not come back to life. Nothing happened at all. People place all kinds of hopes and dreams on magic. But as the last magician, I can say this. Magic cannot grant wishes that are truly impossible. But I would add one more thing to that statement. As we sat on the ground, gazing absent-mindedly at the sky, a girl in black appeared before us. Juju, dressed in mourning attire. Seeing Evan here in front of the grave surprised her, as did the sight of me, an odd-looking magician. In that moment, it struck me. I realized what magic was truly needed in this town. Evan, how about practicing your beginner magic again? I called out to him. Evan, without hesitation, moved his wand in the familiar motion. He had practiced so many times before. So casually, so naturally, he conjured a few pieces of candy. The candies floated in the air and gently fell into Juju's startled hands. Is this an offering for him? Evan, did you come here to pay your respects? Juju's voice was soft as she looked at him. Evan faltered, unable to find the right words. Thank you. Juju smiled, her face lighting up with joy. I passed through the castle gates and stepped onto the vast plains beyond the town. In the days that followed, Juju remained in mourning for a while. But after that, she and Evan began to see each other more often. On occasion, I stopped by her fruit stall to buy my favorite oranges. Each time I saw her, her vitality seemed to grow. She looked even more radiant than before. Evan, I'd heard, had started growing fruit himself. Juju said she was looking forward to selling the fruit he would harvest. As I walked across the open land, I reached into my pouch and took out a piece of candy. It was from that day one of the candies Evan had made. Juju had shared it with me. I placed it in my mouth. It was still bitter. But Juju had eaten hers with a beaming smile.